There was something about John F. Kennedy from the very beginning.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down the American presidents who, for better or worse, changed history the most.
He, more than any other single person, had created the United States.
Number 10, Harry S. Truman. The 33rd president significantly altered the course of American and global history.
No other president of the United States has been called upon to do so much in such a brief period of time that is of such great importance to the future security and prosperity of all mankind.
Ascending to the presidency in 1945 after Franklin D. Roosevelt's death, Truman's decision to use atomic bombs against Japan hastened the end of World War II and inaugurated the nuclear age. He implemented the Marshall Plan, revitalizing war-torn Europe and containing communism, and established the Truman Doctrine, foundational to Cold War policy.
The Marshall Plan provided economic aid to the countries of Western Europe.
Domestically, Truman desegregated the armed forces, setting a precedent for civil rights advancements. His leadership during pivotal moments, including the Korean War and the recognition of Israel, underscored his lasting impact on U.S. foreign policy and societal progress.
In retirement, he refused to profit personally through speaking or consulting fees, noting that as president, he'd tried never to forget who he was and where he was returning. He died the day after Christmas in 1972 at age 88.
Number 9, Woodrow Wilson. Serving from 1913 to 1921, Wilson's tenure was marked by significant domestic reforms known as the New Freedom, which included the establishment of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Trade Commission, aimed at increasing economic oversight and fairness. Wilson's leadership during World War I and his subsequent push for the League of Nations reshaped international relations, promoting the idea of collective security and diplomacy over warfare.
He had this extraordinary confidence that his was the right, that he was the special vehicle of the Lord, that he spoke the truth, so that opposition became almost, in that definition, sacrilegious.
Though the U.S. Senate did not ratify the Treaty of Versailles and the U.S. never joined the League, Wilson's vision laid the groundwork for the future United Nations.
And in these last days of his life, he can only hope that someday other men will raise high the banners which he had carried with such dedication.
His advocacy for self-determination and new international order marked a decisive shift in U.S. foreign policy, despite his controversial legacy on domestic civil liberties and racial segregation.
Wilson was also noted for opposing prohibition. He correctly thought it would be unenforceable, but he was unable to prevent its official ratification in 1919.
Number 8, Ronald Reagan. This president's economic policies, known as Reaganomics, were aimed at reducing the size of government, cutting taxes, and deregulating industries, which proponents credit with stimulating economic growth and ending the stagflation of the 1970s.
Reaganomics wasn't just about tax cuts. The policy had 3 other central points: deregulating businesses, turning government services over to private contractors, and decreasing spending on domestic social programs.
Reagan's aggressive stance against the Soviet Union, epitomized by his call to, quote, tear down this wall in Berlin, and his strategic defense initiatives played a key role in ending the Cold War. His administration's emphasis on conservative social values and a strong national defense shifted the political landscape in the U.S., reviving American patriotism and influencing the global balance of power.
Ronald Reagan spoiled us. He told us we could have our cake and eat it too. I would say that history will say America became a spoiled child under Ronald Reagan.
Reagan's legacy is marked by his charismatic leadership, promotion of free market policies, and contributions to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, making him a transformative figure in late 20th century history.
I had no idea that in my lifetime I would see the collapse of the Soviet system. Never.
Number 7, Lyndon B Johnson. The acerbic Johnson served from 1963 to 1969 and fundamentally transformed American society through his domestic policies.
This is a man who truly wanted to make a difference in his world.
He wanted to do anything he could to level the playing field.
His vision of a, quote, great society led to landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibited racial discrimination in voting. Johnson's administration also created Medicare and Medicaid, significantly expanding health care access, and passed environmental protection laws and education funding support.
So he has a range of programs that he is able to pass through in kind of a record amount of time, something like a year and a half, over 100 pieces of legislation.
However, his presidency was deeply marred by the escalation of the Vietnam War, which significantly eroded his popularity and overshadowed his domestic achievements.
Now, looking at Lyndon Johnson, I think history happens to agree with me, namely that he was a great president with one of the greatest tragic mistakes that this country ever made, which was Vietnam. And it undermined, without question, the unity of the country, or the majority force together.
Number 6, Theodore Roosevelt. This renowned figure in American history was known for his exuberant personality and versatile policies that forever changed the nation's direction.
Roosevelt presented himself as the reasonable alternative to the radicals. Constructive change offers the best method of avoiding destructive change, he argued. Reform is the antidote to revolution.
He was a driving force behind the progressive movement, advocating for the conservation of natural resources, which led to the establishment of numerous national parks and forests. Roosevelt's commitments to the, quote, square deal domestic policies promoted fairness for workers, consumers, and businesses, laying the groundwork for modern consumer protection and labor rights.
He used the Oval Office as a bully pulpit to preach the virtues of vigorous physical activity and social reform. He bellowed against corporate greed and crooked politicians. He was, in short, a pistol.
Internationally, he was instrumental in negotiating the end of the Russo-Japanese War, for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he played a key role in the construction of the Panama Canal, expanding America's naval power and influence.
Perhaps the only thing that can be easily understood about him is that he was an original.
Number 5, James Madison. The fourth President of the United States played a crucial role in shaping the nation's early years. Known as the Father of the Constitution, his contributions to the drafting of the Constitution and the Federalist Papers were pivotal in defining the framework of American democracy.
And at just 36, he personally wrote much of the United States Constitution, the document that would serve as the foundation for America's new government.
Madison's time at the top was marked by the War of 1812 against Britain, often called America's Second War of Independence, which challenged the young nation's sovereignty and resilience.
It was a disaster. One of the rare times Madison failed to think through an important policy decision. The United States simply wasn't prepared for war.
His leadership during the war, despite initial unpreparedness and setbacks, eventually led to a sense of national pride and unity. Madison also oversaw the admission of new states to the Union and the establishment of the Second Bank of the United States, reflecting his evolving views on federal power.
James Madison is such an extraordinary figure because he doesn't appear like someone who would play such an important role.
Number 4, John F. Kennedy. The so-called Camelot era, though brief, profoundly impacted American politics, culture, and foreign policy.
The way he came across, his rhetoric, the notes of idealism that he struck.
Every one of us will go home with the most profound impression of what a strong, vital people can accomplish.
Kennedy's charismatic leadership and visionary speeches inspired a generation, promoting ideals of public service and civic responsibility, encapsulated in his famous injunction, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country."
He was the youngest man ever elected to the office and also the first president born in the 20th century.
Domestically, Kennedy advocated for civil rights, pushing for legislation that would later culminate in significant civil rights acts under his successor. Internationally, he navigated the Cold War's treacherous waters, most notably during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations.
Kennedy's initiatives like the Peace Corps and the space program aiming to land a man on the moon highlighted his forward-looking approach. Despite his untimely death, Kennedy's legacy of hope and transformative leadership endures in American memory. Number 3, George Washington.
Washington understood that if he failed, the country would fail. It was that simple.
This American icon's tenure set numerous precedents that fundamentally shaped the American presidency and the early government. As the nation's first president, Washington established the practice of a two-term limit, a tradition that was followed until Franklin D. Roosevelt and later codified in the 22nd Amendment. His leadership in creating the first cabinet and the inaugural address set standards for governance.
Certainly, his first cabinet is probably the best we've ever had. When you have Hamilton at Treasury and Jefferson at State and Henry Knox at War, it just makes every subsequent one look like a pickup team.
His farewell address further advised future generations on the importance of national unity, the dangers of partisan divisiveness, and the value of a foreign policy of neutrality. Washington's tenure was marked by his commitment to small r Republican values, the establishment of a strong federal government, and the precedence of a peaceful transition of power.
He resigned his military command and went home to Mount Vernon. By stepping down, Washington raised himself up as the embodiment of Republican heroism.
Number 2, Franklin D. Roosevelt. FDR was the only president elected to 4 terms. His time in office significantly altered American society and governance, particularly through his New Deal programs, which aimed to address the Great Depression's devastating effects.
His visionary ability to make the case for his ideas.
I want to talk with you about a number of subjects that directly affect the future of the United States.
The New Deal included wide-ranging policies focused on relief for the unemployed, recovery of the economy, and reform of the financial system, including the creation of the Social Security system, establishment of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and implementation of labor protections.
He really changed the framework of the rules of the economy so that the banks, the brokers, the industrial corporations had to observe much more humane standards.
Roosevelt's leadership during World War II was pivotal, shifting the United States from a policy of isolation to becoming a leader on the world stage.
When he goes to the joint session of Congress, that anger and fury are underneath the resolve and determination, and it was just exactly what people needed to hear.
His Fireside Chats, a series of informal radio broadcasts, helped bolster American morale during these challenging times. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1, Abraham Lincoln. Honest Abe's leadership during the Civil War preserved the Union, abolished slavery, strengthened the federal government, and modernized the U.S. economy. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, a decisive move that shifted the war's focus to the abolition of slavery.
As he prepared for the second inaugural address, he wanted to make clear to everybody that he, Lincoln, understood that the war had been a war to free the slaves.
His dedication to the principle that all men are created equal led to the passage of the 13th Amendment, which made slavery unconstitutional. His assassination in April 1865 marked the first assassination of a U.S. president and left the nation without its principal leader during the critical period of Reconstruction.
Just think of it. For Lincoln, finally, this punishing war has come to an end, and he's able to feel a sense of the country is going to go forward. I've done my part as a leader, and he only has 5 days to appreciate that before he's killed. It drives me crazy.
Lincoln's legacy as a symbol of freedom, justice, and the unyielding belief in the unity of the United States endures, making him one of the most revered figures in American history.
After his death, the image Lincoln helped create rises to take his place.
Which other presidents do you think should be on this list and why? Let us know in the comments.
Whichever way it ends, I have the impression that I shall not last long after it is over. The springs of life are wearing away.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.